What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another After Action Report. As always, it is me, Joshua Joshi Howard, and today we're going to be talking about the most recent event that I went to, where I went to the OC Team 40K GT Series, or OC5s, where we got to play as 5-man teams, and I was playing with Githammer, and a bit of a different Githammer roster than the last event that I actually went to. So this roster that we put together was a little bit different than the roster that we put together for the previous event that I went to, where I played under Githammer Knobhammer, whereas this one we were called Githammer Rampaging Gonstrosities, and if you're not sure what that means, a Gonster is a mix of nitrous monster and Guinness from a can, and there's a couple people on our team that really enjoy this drink, but we didn't have to drink any of it, so it was okay. Whereas Knobhammer, we had a lot of people who were interested in going to the event, and I was able to hand pick everybody who was on my team. For this one, I was actually not the captain. I was a player behind the player who was our coach at CTC. His name is Chris, and he was the captain for this one. And we mostly just came with the first couple of people who were ready to go, the first people who signed up, and the first person who paid the dues in order to be part of the event. So it was a bit of a different roster than the one that I was used to playing with. Before we go too far, of course, I want to go ahead and give a couple of quick shoutouts. Thank you to Nick and Dicehammer, who have been putting on a number of fantastic events. They put on Palm Springs Open. They did the California Team Championships, I believe, and they're also doing this new series of team events that we're doing down in Southern California. So there's this one, which is OC5s, and then OC8s is happening next month, I think it is. So it's going to be a couple of 8-man teams who are going to be participating in that one. So one of the things that was a little bit different about this team's event than a lot of teams' events that I've gone to is that there were not that many teams. It was a total of 8 teams of 5 players for a total of 40 players involved. And of course, 4 of those were on my team. And so I went into this one with a little bit of different expectations. The biggest thing for me is that you can see that in our general matrix, I actually didn't even fill it out. Because what I did is I made individual matrix pages for every single opposing team that we could play against, and I individually did our matrix against every single player at the event, which was kind of fun. It was not exactly what I was expecting to do, but it was, I felt it was more useful to say, oh, if I was going to go up against this list, I will probably expect X, Y, and Z. But if I were to go up against this similar list, because they have like these small differences in the units that they're bringing, it'll probably go a little bit different. And this is how I would expect that to change it up. So let's go ahead and talk about the list that I brought and the role that I was playing on my team in terms of the actual pairing system. So if you watched the video that I did recently where I was talking about Charity Cup, you will recognize almost all of this list is almost identical to the one that I brought there. It is 2 Cadian command squads, 1 joined by an Ogryn Bodyguard with a Brute Shield and a Bulgrin Maul, 1 Rogal Commander with Grand Strategist, 1 Ursula Creed, that is all identical to the last list that I played, 1 unit of 10 Cadian Shock Troopers. At Charity Cup, it was 20 Cadian Shock Troopers. This time I reduced it down to 10. 2 units of Catachan Jungle Fighters, 1 unit of 20 Death Corps of Krieg, 2 Tauroxes, 1 Hellhound with a multi-melta, 1 Luminous Battle Tank with multi-melta+lascannon, 1 LR Exterminator with Plasma Cannon, Lascannon, 2 LR Vanquishers with Triple Flamer, 1 LR Vanquisher with multi-melta+lascannon, and then the change that I made by dropping 10 of the Cadians is I was able to add a second Scout Sentinel. So, as you can see, I was pretty confident going into this list. I know that I had contacted several of the other teams before we were actually going to the event because more DACA was in its unnerved state, and I was trying to get a sense of are people going to this event with the intention of like really trying to win, in which case I will probably play more DACA, but if nobody else is going to be playing more DACA, I'm not going to play it either. And it was a little bit funny to me because I asked, I think 5 teams if they had anybody who was going to be playing more DACA. They all said none of them were going to be playing it, but of the 2 teams that I did not talk to, both of them ended up playing it. So I was like, it is what it is. But ultimately, the role that I was playing in our pairings was that I was really intending to be our second defender a lot of the time. Because as you can see, this is not a mistake. There are, in fact, of the 5 maps we were playing on, 2 of them were going to be on Games Workshop Layout 1. One of them was going to be on Games Workshop Layout 4, which is pretty open. And then we had 2 different WTC layouts. One of them is like fairly open, but not super open. One of them is also fairly open, but it's got strong staging areas on day 1. And on day 2, once again, it was 2 Games Workshop 1s, 1 Games Workshop 4, one that is still kind of open, but still has some strong staging areas, and then the same thing for WTC. And so basically what our main goal was throughout this was as long as I got to play my list on not these WTC maps into matches that I was comfortable on, I was going to have a good time. And I was happy playing on these three maps, either the Games Workshop Layout 1, but I was really hoping to play on Games Workshop Layout 4 as often as I could. And by being our second defender, that oftentimes meant that we could use our first defender to pull out, firstly, a matchup that I didn't want to play, and also one of these maps such that I was going to have a little bit more control over which map I played on. It was going to give me a lot better chance on playing on one of the three maps that I wanted instead of one of the two maps that I did not. So with this in mind, it was kind of expected that I was going to be pulling at least small to medium wins in basically all of my games. I was set up to be one of the big scorers for our team. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and talk about the first opponent in the first game that I played against. The first one that I played was up against Omar Patel, and Omar was the very first opponent I ever played at a competitive Warhammer event. Really good guy, lots of fun to talk to, and he was part of the team Defy All Odds. His list was playing a mechanized assault list, which bore a little bit of similarity to some of the things that David Gaylord has been playing. He had 2 Rogal commanders, 2 Tech Priest Engine Seers, one of which had the Sacred Unguents enhancement so you can give the transport reroll hits, 2 units of Catachan Jungle Fighters, 2 Chimeras, 1 Taurox, 2 units of Khazarkin, 1 Krieg Heavy Weapon Squad, 1 Eradicator with melta+lascannon, 2 Exterminators with melta+lascannon, and then 3 units of Ogryn. Now, my first thought when looking at this list was, it doesn't make a lot of sense in my head. My second thought on looking at this list is, okay, I understand what this list does, but it's not easy to play unless you are a good player who understands how to like maximize this. But I know that Omar had said he had played like maybe 2 games with it before he had actually gotten to this event, maybe. And so it was one of those things where I did not think he was going to be able to play it super well. I did not think he was going to be able to really push up against my list because I have a lot of lethal hits. He does not have it, and that means that I have a massive advantage when we're going for this shootout. For our first game, we ended up playing it on Mission Delta, Mission D, which is Scorched Earth, Swift Action, Tipping Point. So, of course, Swift Action is the one where your battle line can advance and do actions or fall back and do actions. So this one, I was kind of expecting to get somewhere around a 12 or 13 in the Matrix. I was going to get a small win out of this one, and I was pretty confident that was going to happen. Not only is my list better at skirmishing than his is, because I have a really good cheap pieces that I can use to out-OC him, but it's on Scorched Earth, so it's reasonable to build a decent-sized primary advantage on this. You're probably looking at about 2 or 3 differential points if you are actually going to be putting a lot of pressure on your opponent, because it is hard to hold more than your home objective, especially on turns 2 and 3 if your opponent knows how to play around that. But the big advantage that I had was by parking a couple of Vanquishers right in here, it meant that Omar was never going to be able to put transports in here safely because it only takes 1 Vanquisher shot to kill a Chimera. It only takes 1 Vanquisher shot to kill a Taurox, and they're going to be hitting and wounding fairly reliably, and I'm going to be shooting twice down this firing lane. So it's going to be very difficult for him to actually keep them safe. I will almost always have opportunities to shoot that, and he doesn't really have any tools to take away this little pocket from me. This meant that my natural was going to be very safe, and his natural, I could put a Taurox right in here. I could put a lot of pressure right in here, such that I can just drive onto his natural as I see fit. But probably the most impactful and most learnable experience that we had from this game actually happened fairly early in the game in the bottom of 2. So what happened, because I had gone first, was I had set up my unit of Krieg somewhere in here with like a guy or 2 sticking out onto this objective. And I also put my unit of Ogryn Bodyguard kind of stretched out about like this. And then I had, I think it was a Hellhound, it might have been a Taurox, I don't remember exactly what it was that was on this objective. But I still had OC on this objective as well. I put 2 things on here because I was trying to make sure that it was not worth my opponent's time to try and bring stuff out from here to try and take it away from me because he wouldn't be able to kill it, and if he tried to charge onto it, I could heroic this way if I needed to. But the other thing that I did was that I said I was going to start burning the middle objective with this Krieg unit. And there are 2 ways to stop a burn. The first one, you auto-C the opponent at the end of your own turn because you have to start it in their turn and you have until your end of your turn to finish it. And the other one is you just kill them off of it. Make sure that the unit that is currently doing the burn is no longer touching the objective. So Omar, for his part, he had a Chimera just chilling in here, and he would cycle units through this Chimera in order to send them out this direction. One of the units that he sent out was a unit of Catachan, and the unit came out this way such that they were something like this. And this unit threw a bunch of shots into the Krieg. However, it was not enough, and I continued to make sure that I kept at least one guy on the point such that Omar was going to have to try and charge me. But unfortunately, Omar had moved his models in a way that was setting up for a potential issue. Because Omar moved a little bit more this direction than this direction, it meant that if he rolled high enough, he was going to have to base this part of his models up against my part of the models. And this meant that when Omar rolled, he started moving his models in a way that was potentially less effective than it could have been. The models that started out over here maybe could have charged in this direction, and these models maybe could have come around over this way. But because the models ended up coming this way, it meant that these models were still going to have to base, and it meant that they had to come over this way. Now, some of you can probably already figure out what the problem with this is. It's that the Ogryn Bodyguard unit, which is over here, is now going to get to go for heroic intervention. And of course, I did. So that meant that when the Catachan came in, yes, they killed some of the Kriegers, but that was not really the issue. I was never really worried about the single unit of Catachan clearing a whole unit of Krieg by themselves. It's simply too many shots that they're going to have to put out, and the quality of melee that Catachan have is just not very high, especially going up against a unit of Krieg that is in cover with take cover. So the Catachan come in, they kill like 4 guardsmen or something like that, and then that means it is the Cadian command squad's turn to swing. And remember, they have 2 power fists, 5 Bullgrin Maul attacks, and then a couple of attacks from the rest of the guys. These guys come in, and I choose to activate them first, and that means that I punch a bunch of the Catachan to death. And what that does is a lot of the remaining Krieg, which I think there are probably about 6-ish of them still alive at this point, the rest of the Krieg were then able to use their pile-in, because a bunch of the models here had died, such that I was able to pile in and consolidate around this way, such that the few remaining models that I still had in the unit were able to swing around and put themselves on the objective. And so even though Omar still had, like, I think it was 2 guys, the fact that I'm now +1 to hit, +1 to wound, with some power swords, with the rest of my guys, meant that I was able to kill most of the Catachan, and I was able to out-OC him at the end of the turn. So that meant that I was able to burn the middle objective in the bottom of 2. This did a couple of things for me. One, it got me 5 primary pretty early on. And the second thing that it did is it let me know that I would never have to take his home objective in order to score a 50 on primary. I was going to score my home and my natural every single turn, because he had already shown that he didn't have the tools necessary to take out my natural objective, and I was going to be able to burn the natural on the top of 5. So I was going to get the burn for the middle objective and also the burn for the natural objective. I did not need to take his home objective in order to actually go for a burn. And so I could then take my entire army, and I knew that I was going to be fairly consistent in the way that I was actually going to be able to play up against his natural. I could take the game and push it really aggressively in ways that I probably could not have otherwise. The other thing that Omar did that I think gave me a lot of leeway in this game was he put his first Rogal Dorn somewhere in here, and his second Rogal Dorn commander was over here. And this was totally fine by me, because the biggest thing about this is that this Rogal Dorn here is going to take a lot of time just getting to this point, right? That's going to take an entire turn of movement just to get around here. And it also means that this Rogal Dorn is never, basically ever going to shoot in the middle. It's never going to shoot down this firing lane. It's never going to shoot down this firing lane. It's a Rogal Dorn that I just simply do not have to deal with at all. So basically what I decided to do from this position is I decided I was going to table myself. I was going to throw so much of my army at him over the next couple of turns that it was just going to suppress his score. I was going to kill his ability to score, but I didn't really care about killing his ability to kill me. Partly, he didn't kill me very well anyway. A Rogal Dorn and an Exterminator maybe kill a Lehman Russ per turn. But if I could put some pressure on his home, and I could put enough pressure on his natural objective, eventually I was going to get to a spot where, because we were playing on his side of the board the entire game, he was never going to really put any pressure on my side of the board. I was going to score my 50 on primary and almost maximum on secondary, and hopefully I was going to be able to deny enough primary from his side of the board that he was never going to be able to catch up. And that's pretty close to how the game actually played out. Overall, I maxed my primary and got very close to maxing out on secondary. Whereas Omar, because I had stopped him from holding this on turn 2 and on turn 3, and he only got 1 burn off instead of 2 burns, he only ended up scoring a 35 on primary and only scored 26 on secondary. And at the end of the game, he had way more models still alive than I did. But the end score was I scored a 97 to his 71, which in WTC terms and teams terms means that I got a 15-5 for my team. Now, considering that I had projected myself to score a 12 in this matchup, getting 3 above Matrix was really good for our team. Overall, despite one of our players being 9 points under Matrix, the fact that the rest of us were able to be above Matrix meant that we ended up being overall getting the score that we had initially expected, which was a 57. We needed a 54 to win, so we had a bit of a comfortable margin where we were actually able to take it down. Our next opponents were the Mile High Club, and they were a cool group of guys who play out in Big Bear. And they're trying to put on a GT coming up in the next year or so. I remember for this one, the one thing that I really did not want to play against was Chaos Demons, because they were playing Plague Legion, and I don't know what Plague Legion does. But I was pretty happy to play up against anything else, because I had the tools necessary to kill lots of Marines, I had the tools to kill Imperial Knights, and I had the tools to kill Elves. I probably could have played against the Chaos Demons, but as I told my team, I don't really know what it does. I don't feel like I can Matrix against it very well, because it's got so many Battle Shock shenanigans. Guard is particularly susceptible to Battle Shocks. And so I just would rather not play up against something that I don't really know how to play against, especially when other people are relying on me doing well. So the player that I got to play up against, his name was Grant, and he was playing Chaos Space Marines Pact-Bound Zealots. And he was playing a bit of an unusual Pact-Bound Zealots. I'm not used to seeing this kind of list in this detachment, but it was 2 Dark Communes, 2 Cultist Mobs, 2 units of Accursed Cultists, 2 units of Chaos Bikers, 2 Chaos Predator Destructor with the Chaos Mark of Nurgle so they could reactive loan up, 2 Forge Fiends with Nurgle, so same thing, 2 units of 5 Possessed with Slanesh so they had access to an advance and charge strat, 1 unit of 5 Raptors, and then 2 Venom Crawlers. Now, one of the big reasons why I wanted to play up against this is because I was second defender, and it was a very open map. It meant that I could put it on Games Workshop 4, which is very, very open. The other big thing is I had just played up against someone who works for Team USA, who very clearly knows how to play Accursed Cultist, and I figure that pretty much anybody that I'm going to play up against where I can have a 1-point game against Team USA representatives, I'm going to absolutely smash anybody else. The other big thing that I saw about this is that it really did not have the tools to kill Leman Russes. Because the Chaos Predators were the autocannon variant instead of the lascannon variant, he just did not have the volume of fire necessary to kill a Leman Russ. Forge Fiends being only strength 10 and averaging 6 shots means that you're only going to average 1 or 2 wounds against a Leman Russ, then I'm going to save half of them. He did not have the tools, and he did not really have a melee threat that I was actually worried about for my entire army. We ended up playing this one on Mission Bravo, which is Purge the Foe, Tipping Point, and Smoke and Mirrors. Smoke and Mirrors, of course, being the one where you can put something on the board and then redeploy it into strategic reserves. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of shooting lanes on this. You can't really stage anywhere. There's going to be lots of opportunities to shoot down all of these long firing lanes. And one of the things that is huge about this is this objective here in the middle is completely wide in the open. There is no way to stand on this without getting absolutely hammered from every angle. Now, Grant was a newer player. Grant was also in a really bad matchup on a really bad map. I had this marked as a small win in our matrix originally. However, that was assuming that it was not necessarily going to be my map pick. If it's on my map pick, realistically, this is probably looking like a 15. The main reasons why it becomes such a dominant win on my map pick is the distances that he's going to have to actually go for. Yes, Accursed Cultists have access to advance and charge once per game, but where are they going to be staging? This is not a safe staging spot. This is not a safe staging spot. This isn't a safe staging spot either. The only real place that you can really stage for anything is in, like, this triangle here. And the distance from, like, this staging spot to the back here is approximately 17 inches. That means that if I'm playing well, I'm going to be giving you 11 inches of distance that you have to cover over 3d6, which is doable, but it's a 50-50. And that is the best case scenario. Fortunately, Grant didn't really take this into heart. Like, he didn't necessarily put himself in a situation where I was going to be really put under a lot of pressure. The first unit of Accursed Cultists were deployed back here. The second one was deployed back here. That meant that it was going to take a long time for this one to even get towards that triangle. It was going to take maybe a turn and a half, depending on what he actually rolled on his advance. And this one is just never going to go anywhere. It's literally going to have to come out into the open where I'm going to get to shoot it for multiple turns if I want to. Legitimately, I think a lot of this game became untenable from the deployment step. I think about the only way that Grant can turn this into, like, a reasonably close game is, one, putting a unit of Accursed Cultists in reserve. That feels really bad. But he needs to be able to use the advance and charge in a way that I can't plan for it in the same way. Or at least make me devote extra resources to screening out pretty far. The other way that you maybe do it is you accept that you're going to put like 2 units of Accursed Cultists here, one of them will stage here, one of them will stage here, and then you're just going to make the game really confusing around this objective. And that's really about it. That's like the only real game plan that you have to try and make this game work. If Grant deploys like his entire army in this section and just goes hard on this side of the board, maybe he puts enough pressure on this side of the board that he can get a couple of kill mores. But because it's Purge the Foe, I don't actually have to even contest my natural expansion as long as he's not holding more than me. I just have to throw out cheap things in order to hold the same number of objectives that he does. But that means he needs to find opportunities to hold more objectives than I do at some point in the game. But to give you guys a sense of how one-sided this game really was, Grant did not kill his first unit until turn 3 of this game. On turn 1, I killed a Venom Crawler off of here. On turn 2, he took some shooting at some of my Lehman Russes, but like I said, he would have to get pretty lucky to even try and take down some of these Russes at all. Brought out like a Forge Fiend and like a Predator. I think the other Predator was here, I want to say. I was able to kill this one and this one, and suddenly his ability to kill my tanks was just completely gone. At this point, he was relying on sustained lethal coming out from his Accursed Cultists. When I looked back at this game, it was actually pretty hard to try and come up with useful things as like useful feedback for like what could have been done differently. I was set up in a good matchup. I was set up on a great board. The mission was okay for me, but the big thing about teams is I told Grant the problem was that he opted in to playing the game with me, into playing a trading game at all. By bringing out tanks here, 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 wherever it was that they exactly were, and by bringing them out early, he opted in to actually playing the mission. And I was way better at playing the mission than he was. If Grant had accepted pretty early on that he was not going to score very much in this game, what he needed to do was score 32 points of primary, so he was going to get his kill 1 and hold 1 every single turn, so you're going to get 32 there, and then aggressively cycle cards in order to try and score every secondary that he could, he probably could have got something in the neighborhood of a 7 for his team. But as it was, coming out and trying to play for a singles win, when he was already deploying so defensively, ended up just meaning that he was just too far behind in tempo to really make anything happen. I didn't lose much of my army for this entire game. But still, overall, I ended up only pulling out an 18 on this game. And I was talking to my team afterwards about how difficult it is to suppress primary on Purge the Foe. Because as long as Grant is standing on his home, which it was sticky with cultists, I don't really have a way to interact with that. If I'm coming out to kill one of his units every turn, or hopefully more than that, he's probably going to be able to kill at least one unit on my side of the board on most turns as well. Oh, one kind of funny thing that did happen this game was on turn 4, Grant drew Cull the Horde and Overwhelming Force. I had the unit of Death Korps of Krieg over here still that he could theoretically get to if he rolled a 6 on advance into a 9-inch charge. Of course, that didn't happen. And so then I asked Grant, what do you want to do with these secondaries? And he says, I think I'm going to hang on to both Cull the Horde and Overwhelming Force because he didn't kill anything on an objective. And I was like, are you sure? Because I'm probably not going to stand on an objective next turn. He was like, yes, I'm sure. And I'm like, okay, cool. So then what happened is in bottom of 4, I scored my hold 1 but not hold more. And I took everything that was on an objective and took it off. So it was not going to be possible unless he killed my guys on my home objective all the way over here, which he was nowhere in range of getting to. And of course, this Cull the Horde unit just ran away. I ordered it move, move, move. It advanced back into the back corner where he could not get to it whatsoever. And so it's just like one of those small things where it's, just think about whether or not your opponent can control whether or not you have access to it. Because I was going second and bottom of 5, it meant that I was going to be able to hold objectives at the end of the turn. I did not need to be standing on them for the top of 5. I did not need to be standing on them when my turn started on turn 5. Anyway, Grant was a pretty cool dude. Game was pretty one-sided, but I hope he had a good time. I had fun rolling dice. Overall, like I said, I pulled out an 18 here. The one thing that gave us a little bit of worry is Alejandro, our World Leaders player, actually had a really tough game going up against the Imperial Knights player. And so this was the first time Alejandro had ever been below Matrix. But, of course, our Space Marine player had a pretty good game into their Demons player. I had a really good game into their Chaos Space Marines player. And so we were still able to pull out a decent-sized win, getting 56 points. For our third round, we ended up playing up against Las Vegas Mind Goblins. And one of the funniest things that happened at the event, at least to me, happened at the beginning of this round. As we were pairing, I was very adamant when I was talking to our captain Chris that if he let me be second defender, because Games Workshop 4 was still available, I would slaughter any of these opponents. Simply because I was going to outshoot anybody on this board. It was so open, I was going to have so much control, and nothing could really scratch my tanks. So when I got paired into Votann, which I had played twice at Charity Cup, once against Kitsmith Hannah, I was very confident that I was going to outshoot them. But Cody, of course, said, "Oh, nice, this is the map that I also wanted." And I was definitely thinking, well, one of us is about to be wrong. Hopefully it's not me. So Cody was, of course, playing Leagues of Votann. He had a Brokir Iron Master, an Einherjar Champion, a Call with the Grim Demeanor enhancement, so that's the one that where you ignore modifiers, 2 units of Warriors that he split into 5s with Sagittars, 3 Sagittars, 2 units of 5 Chthonian Berserks with the Hammers, 1 unit of 10 Einherjar Hearthguard, 2 Hecaton Land Fortresses, 2 units of 3 Bikes, and 1 unit of Hernkin Jaegers. Cody and I played this one on Mission J, which is Linchpin, Raise Banners, and Search and Destroy. And of course, we played it on my map pick, which was Games Workshop 4. Once again, the shooting lanes here are crazy. Shooting angles are very long on this board. You have a lot of control over it, and there's not a lot of staging on this one either. And one of the big things that happened in this game that I thought was a mistake right away from deployment yet again was that Cody chose to put his Hearthguard on the board. They weren't in Hecaton, and they weren't in Deep Strike. They started somewhere in here. He put a Hecaton Land Fortress over here, and the other one was also in reserve. Now, having played this matchup twice before I actually got to this event, I knew a couple of things about this matchup. One, Votann has a lot of strength 6 and 7 weapons. If you can get enough judgment tokens on a target, you could get them to wounding my vehicles on 4s, which is pretty good, but they're still mostly AP 1 and 2, ignoring cover. So I'm still mostly taking 3-ups against a lot of their saves. The other thing about this matchup is that Sagittars and Hecaton Land Fortresses, with their crit guns with the funny sustained D3, aren't consistent. If he rolls hot, he can pick up a Rogal Dorn in one activation of a Sagittar. But most of the time, you don't. So as long as I wasn't giving Cody the opportunity to shoot multiple Hecatons and multiple Sagittars into the Rogal Dorn or into a single Leman Russ, I'm probably not going to die. The last thing that I know about this matchup is that Hearthguard are not scary. They're fairly scary if you actually get them into melee, but the fact that they have all of their grenade launchers where you get 10d6 shots, plus you can give them sustain 2, plus blast, means that yes, you're going to be shooting something in the neighborhood of 55 shots into my unit of 20 Death Korps of Krieg. But because it's AP 0, you're not going to kill the entire unit most of the time. Usually, I'm going to walk away with a couple of guys left, and I only need one of them alive to start rezzing guys back into the unit, such that it will be relevant later on in the game. And so this game started going in my favor very early on. First thing that I did, I took my Command Squad and Ogryn Bodyguard, and I advanced them onto the middle objective so that I could score a big secure no man's land. I also took the Death Korps of Krieg unit that was here. I moved them into this ruin, but I stuck out just enough such that if you shot at them and didn't do a lot of damage to the unit, I could res more guys out of the point as well. I also took a Taurox that was somewhere over here. It advanced and scouted and ended up just hiding in this ruin behind the wall where it was going to be very difficult for him to get to. Cody then took a lot of his army. This unit of Hearthguard came out to around here, and they shot the Death Korps a lot, but I still ended up with 2 guys still alive. It took him, I think it was like a Sagittar, this Hecaton poked out here, and like another Sagittar that was here, of shooting at the Cadian Command Squad and the Ogryn Bodyguard in order to actually kill it. So that was a lot of his army that was now in the open that I had only spent 105 and then 130, so like 235 points to draw out all of his heavy hitters. The last mistake that I think Cody made was when he took bikes that started over here and they came out this way, they ended up having one guy on this ruin, something like this, instead of being wholly on this side of the ruin. This meant that my crackback was going to be hard. I was going to do a lot of damage to Cody on my turn 2. So on turn 2, I end up drawing Marked for Death. Cody ends up marking this Hecaton, this big unit of Hearthguard, and a unit of dudes that was hanging out on his home objective. So I had put a Legionnaires Battle Tank in reserve, and I brought it out over here. I had Vanquisher, Vanquisher, Vanquisher pop out this way. Exterminator was here, and the Rogal Dorn, who was doing sabotage here originally, came out this way in order to try and shoot everything. My big goal was I was going to take him off of this objective with the Legionnaires Battle Tank. I was going to take these two Vanquishers and this Rogal Dorn. We were going to kill both of these Sagittars, and hopefully the guys inside. And any bonus damage that we had was going to be put into the Marked for Death target. And then this Vanquisher would take a shot downrange. This ended up working out very well for me. I killed all these bikes. This Sagittar died, and I think I also still had a Hellhound at this point, or something. I don't remember why, but I remember a lot of the guys inside ended up getting barbecued as well. This Sagittar died, and I had enough firepower to kill the guys inside as well. I killed like 4 out of this unit, and then Cody rolled the 6 on his Vanquisher save in order to actually keep his Hecaton in good shape. But from this position, I had killed basically all of Cody's ability to score. There was like one guy over here that had popped out of the Sagittar that was still alive. There was nothing from the Sagittar that was still active. The unit of Hearthguard were at half combat strength, which meant that they weren't going to be doing a lot of damage. The bikes were gone. The Jaegers were gone. So what Cody had left was Cody had 2 forts, 2 units of 5 berserks, 1 Sagittar, 6 Terminators with a call, and 3 bikes in his army. He was not going to be doing a whole lot. Oh, and a solo Einherjar champ running around. And one of the major things that happened from this position was I knew that this unit of Terminators and this Hecaton, he could not afford to run them away as Marked for Death targets. Because if I chose to hang on to them and he chose to just hide, I'm just going to discard the card next turn. Sure, I'll spend a CP for it, but I was swimming in CP from this position. And if he was not using his heavy hitters that were left in his army to come fight me, he was going to lose massively anyway. I was going to be scoring big on Linchpin by holding up here, holding down here, and also potentially holding here as soon as he let me. So if he just moved backwards, he was setting himself up to score multiple 3s in a row. He needed to start taking some risks, and he needed to start taking them fast. And to put it simply, the risks just were not working out. He ended up putting a unit of Hearthguard here in the center. I think maybe they charged a Scout Sentinel or the Hellhound or something that was here. He took some Berserks out. They charged this way, and they got into a tank. He brought in the Hecaton that was in reserve. He shot the Legionnaires Battle Tank to death over here. But, like, he killed the auxiliary damage in my army. I still had the Rogal Dorn. I still had, like, 3 or 4 Leman Russes still active running around the board. And I just resolved to kill all the Terminators and then slowly try and chip down the Hecaton land fortresses. He did not have the tools to take away the primary, and I even had a Taurox that, like, hung out over here and was just fighting up against the E-Champ for a couple of turns because I just needed it to stay on the objective and beat 2 OC. Ultimately, this game ended up being a 91-55. I was able to hold Cody to only 17 primary because he was able to hold his home 4 times, and then he held this one only once. So this is 12 and 5. Now, I think in general, the game plan that Cody had in trying to play up against my army was incorrect. Layout 4 is incredibly open in the middle. But one of the things that is very true about Layout 4 is that it's kind of hard to shift from one firing lane to another. And I had indicated pretty early on which of the firing lanes I was prepared to be powerful in. I had devoted several tanks to be strong in these firing lanes. I devoted several tanks here to be strong on this firing lane and this firing lane. And I devoted a Rogal Dorn up here to be strong in these firing lanes. However, that meant it was going to be very difficult for me to control this firing lane. I had the Legionnaires Battle Tank that could be kind of wherever I wanted to. I ended up bringing it here just to shoot him off of here and force him to commit resources to come in over this way. But the way that you're supposed to play this matchup is you don't contest the center. It's linchpin. It's in the open. You're not going to hold it, especially not against an army that has as good shooting as mine does. What Cody really needed to do is he needed to be ready to take Sagittars, probably two of them actually, and they're going to come hide over here where they can pretty consistently come take me off of this objective, or at least threaten to be really annoying in this objective. Also, the bikes that started over here, if they're going to come to this objective, they need to do it over here. They need to be either in this pocket, where you can try and screen out a Leman Russ from coming in, or if you're feeling a little bit more risky, you can be in this pocket and use them as a trading piece. However, I don't think this should be the trading piece that you're going to be putting over here. I'm pretty sure this is supposed to be a unit of 5 Hearthkin Warriors, such that when I bring out a Hellhound or bring out a Leman Russ Flamers to shoot at them, you're going to be able to crack back. You never win this game if you're going to be spending your Sagittars shooting at things that are not Leman Russes, things that are not tanks. You have to try and play this one a bit like a rat. You have to try and play this one such that you get to fire first at all of the tanks, and you're bringing out your entire army all at the same time. The fact that he did it in a bit of a piecemeal in the way that a guard player wants to play, right, where we're going to put out like our transports. Our transports are cheap. Our transports don't matter. Our transports don't do damage. If you want to play that trading game against probably the best trading army, the best trading faction in the entire game, you better be damn sure that you have a list that is going to be able to do it. And unfortunately, Cody, I don't think understood how much firepower I was really going to be able to put in and how much higher quality firepower I had that was going to be able to shoot at his vehicles as compared to what he had going up against mine. Overall, I posted a bigger win than I was expecting. I was expecting to pull about a 13 from this, but instead I was able to get a 17. Will, once again, despite expecting a 10, ended up pulling out a 14. Potentially the most important thing was that Alejandro playing up against Glynis here was able to pull out more than a 0. The fact that both of this Tau opponent's first 2 games were 20 zeros in his favor. So the fact that we were able to pull out an 11 from this game was a really big deal, because if he had pulled out a 0, that takes us from a 57 down to a 46, which is a close loss for us. So shout out to my team for actually making sure that they're able to pull up and be mostly above the matrix from what we were expecting. For our last round, we had already played up against the only other undefeated team in the Las Vegas Mind Goblins. That meant that we were playing up against Dice Hammer Average Joes, which at this point were 2 wins and 1 loss. Overall, our matrix was looking pretty okay. We were expecting to go in and pair for the top end of a draw and hopefully be better players than our opponents. So for this one, I ended up playing up another guard mirror, and this one was going up against Andrew Dickinger and his Hammer of the Emperor. This was, yet again, another guard list that I was not really expecting. It started off with Gaunt's Ghosts, 3 Leman Russ Commanders with Exterminator autocannons and 2 Heavy Bolters and a Lascannon, 3 Militarum Tempestus Command Squads, a Rogal Dorn Commander with the Reroll 1s enhancement, 1 unit of Cadian Shock Troops, 3 Tauroxes, 2 units of 5 Attilan Rough Riders, 2 Cyclops Demo Vehicles, and then 3 units of 5 Tempestus Scions. Now, something that I thought was a little bit funny was that Andrew was their team's first defender, and so that means I was part of the first set of attackers. And Andrew said that he was the one who was jumping on the guard grenade for his team, which I thought was pretty funny because he was also playing guard, right? But it's something that I've heard a lot in teams. A lot of people don't want to play against guard. A lot of people don't want to play against me because I have a reputation as being a pretty good guard player. But Andrew felt that he was up to the challenge. Now, going into this one, I expected once again to have a pretty big advantage in terms of actually going for the shootouts. I have lethal hits, my opponents don't. Andrew has a lot of heavy bolters, I have a lot of multi-meltas. Probably the only thing that Andrew had as a higher quality than what I did is that his skirmishing pieces were actually higher quality than mine were. The Tauroxes with the Tempestus Scions are fairly annoying to remove, especially because they're going to be having 4-up saves and oftentimes be in cover. They're also going to be very fast and get to where they're going a lot of the time. We also played this one on Mission L, which is Take and Hold, Search and Destroy, and Hidden Supplies. So instead of there being an objective here in the middle, it was something like this. I remember it was important that you could stand on the objective from outside of the terrain piece here. Now, one of the big advantages I had in this mission again was the fact that I could put a Taurox here, being fairly confident that Andrew was not going to be killing it from long range. He would have to put out 2 tanks realistically to have any reasonable chance of killing a Taurox. Whereas if I put 2 Vanquishers here, like I did, they can come out and shoot, and they will very easily pick up a Taurox and then probably not die on the crackback. This gave me a lot of threat advantage from here, where I could go over here, whereas Andrew, with his Taurox, couldn't really be here at the beginning of the game. Ultimately, the game started off pretty unexciting, but I think Andrew made like a bit of a strategic fumble right off the bat. When he saw what his secondaries were and he knew that he was not going to be able to shoot anything, or rather, he didn't have anything that he wanted to shoot because it would mean that I was going to trade back for more value, he gave all of his tanks take aim anyway. And Timer the Emperor, like with the autos inch 6 advance, it wasn't that big of a deal. However, he could have been automatically moving all of his tanks 19 inches. I think conceptually that already put him in a bit of an awkward spot. We ended up spending the first turn and a half mostly just kind of looking at each other. But this is really important and comes up a lot later. I scored way better on secondary pulls than Andrew did. On turn 1, I scored 11. On turn 2, I scored 9, whereas Andrew scored 4. That meant I was realistically starting this game with about 16 more points, and I was going second, so I was probably going to get a small primary advantage as well. But perhaps the most entertaining moment happened in the bottom of turn 2. So Andrew had a tank commander in top of 2 come out like this way and shoot at and then later charge a Hellhound that I had just posted here just to be a threat, ready to do things. Knowing that even with the 2 Leman Russ tank commanders that he had between the Exterminator autocannons and the heavy bolters that he was going to be giving me a lot of 2-up saves if I popped smoke. He was almost never going to kill it. And he didn't, which was kind of what I expected. But in the bottom of 2, I drew Storm Hostile Objective and Air Denial. And we ended up spending 4 CP fighting over how this was going to happen. So the first thing that happened was he had a Leman Russ tank commander, something here. Biggest point was that it had line of sight on my Hellhound. I had a Taurox, and he had the Leman Russ tank commander, something like this, such that it was engaged with both these targets. Now, what I had wanted to do was I spent my first CP on Insane Bravery on this Hellhound because it was down to 4 wounds, and I really wanted to do both Storm Hostile because all he had on this objective was a Taurox, which is only 2 OC, and I wanted to take my 3 OC Hellhound, move it here, touch this objective here, and also score Air Denial. So I spent 1 OC to make sure that I was going to have the OC to actually do that. Then Andrew spends 1 on Overwatch. Now this is really important because Big Guns Never Tire says that in your shooting phase, you can be selected to shoot as a vehicle or monster while you are engaged. However, the second part of Big Guns Never Tire, that you can shoot at vehicles and monsters while they are engaged, does not specify it has to be in your own shooting phase. So you're allowed to overwatch vehicles and monsters outside your shooting phase, even while they are engaged. He spent his first CP to go for this overwatch. He shoots all of his autocannons, does no damage. Shoots his heavy bolters, does no damage. Finally, he gets to his lascannon, and he rolls a hit, and he rolls a wound. Then I fail a save. So I spend my next one, I spend a second CP on this, on CP reroll, and I fail the save. Then, Andrew rolls his die, and he rolls a 1. He needed to roll at least a 3 in order to kill the Hellhound. So he spent his second CP on another CP reroll, and he actually got the 3 necessary in order to kill the Hellhound. And so overall, we spent 4 CP trying to decide whether or not this Hellhound lived or died, and ultimately, he ended up winning the exchange, and he was able to get the Hellhound. However, that was not the end of the story. So I still had a couple of ways to try and score Storm Hostile Objective. The first one that I went for is I had a unit of Krieg here, and I had given them +1 save, because I had assumed that the Hellhound would live through an Overwatch and actually take this. So what I had to do is I first tried to roll a big enough advance. I needed to roll a 5 in order to get onto this objective. I didn't. I think I rolled a 2. And so I stuck out like 1 guy here in order to make sure that I was going to score Air Denial for 5 points. But the next thing that needed to happen was I needed to figure out a way to score Storm Hostile. And with this tank still just chilling here, I took my Cadian Command Squad and Ogryn Bodyguard. They came out this way, and my goal was I was setting it up such that I had like 1 guy here that depending on what I rolled, if I rolled like a medium roll, I was going to be able to tag this tank, and then the rest of them would not be able to base, so that I would be able to move this way and put at least 4 OC onto the point. The other thing, as I was thinking about this, is I took my 2 Leman Russes that were like here. I brought them out initially with the intent of trying to shoot this. And then I immediately realized, wait a sec, I can't shoot, I can't kill that tank. I need it to charge off of in order to get myself onto the objective. The other thing that I need to be really wary of is if I shot the tank or I shot any tank commander and it died, it was going to shoot on death, and then it was going to do a lot of damage to my Cadian command squad, and then they would not be able to get onto the point. So I end up like shooting very little from these two Vanquishers at this. I think I did no damage to it. Actually, I don't think I did anything at all. But importantly, it did allow me. I rolled like an 8 or something, which allowed me to like base like 2 models here, and then the rest of them could free move as long as they moved closer, and they all moved over this way, such that I was able to take the Ogryn Bodyguard, and I was able to tag the Taurox that was hiding in here. But I was able to put 2 guys on the objective, and they were OC4 altogether, so I was able to score Storm Hostile off of that. But that was probably the most like mechanically interesting part of the entire game, was trying to figure out how can I take Storm Hostile after the Hellhound that was here, which was supposed to score me 9 points all by itself, ended up dying. It ended up forcing me to put a lot more resources out onto the board than I was initially expecting to or initially hoping to. The other problem with having the Cadian command squad come out over here, as opposed to having the Hellhound be here, is Andrew can have guys standing like here and here and here or whatever. They can shoot, and I can't shoot them back. So that was rather unfortunate that I had to give him these trading pieces for free in order to try and score these points, and also to deny him primary. It was worth 9 points to take away this objective from him, because not only would I score Storm Hostile for 4, but I would deny him for 5 on take and hold. The rest of the game was actually just kind of a slugging match, where he would shoot his tanks, I would shoot my tanks, and he actually did more damage to me than I was expecting. His Rogal Dorn tank commander just rolled a bunch of shots into my Legionnaires battle tank and just killed it. I just failed every save on the Legionnaires battle tank, and he just killed it with the main gun alone. I was like, okay, fair enough. And then I shot my Rogal Dorn tank commander with lethal hits, re-rolling ones, and another tank or two, all shooting at this tank with the bonus AP from Fields of Fire and Exterminator, and I didn't kill his Rogal Dorn back. I didn't even do that much damage to it. I think I did 12 altogether, which meant I was still running around on 6. But perhaps the next funniest moment that happened in this was Andrew had a Taurox sitting somewhere in here, and his Rogal Dorn commander was somewhere in here. I had a Taurox that had come around. It initially dropped off Catachan over here, and then come around over this way over the next couple of turns. And I was trying to figure out, can this Taurox charge this Taurox? Because this Taurox was on 1, and at the time, the Rogal Dorn commander was on like 2. And I end up pulling off a charge where this goes and is like hiding in here in the ruin, and I pull a tank shock off, and I kill this. And then Andrew says the worst possible set of words that I think I've ever heard a player say. Man, if I explode, I can kill my Rogal Dorn tank commander. And then he rolls the 6. And then he rolls a 5, so he does 3 mortals to the Rogal Dorn commander, and it also dies. And I just sit there, we're just both like, what the heck just happened? Because that would have been huge. If this Rogal Dorn commander had lived, it could have done a lot more damage. It probably could have killed my Rogal Dorn commander, which at this point was like hanging out somewhere in here. And while this probably isn't enough to get him a singles win, it definitely would have cost me a couple of differential points just not having access to this Rogal Dorn commander. Anyway, the explosion was funny. The Overwatch around the Hellhound was pretty funny. I think Andrew played this game pretty reasonably. I think he probably could have played it a little bit more aggressively, especially since he was going first and he was going to be the one who needed to deny my primary in order to try and hold this game a little bit closer. Knowing that I was going second, I wasn't going to come out first. I was going to wait for him to come forward, and then I was going to rely on the fact that I should have better shooting than he does in order to take his army down. But he rolled a lot of good saves, he rolled a lot of good damage, and he was still able to keep this one fairly close. I remember the other really funny part about this was around the bottom of 4, I hear my captain Chris come over, and I hear him say to one of my other teammates, Josh needs to score a 2 in order for us to get a win. And in my head, I had kind of expected that what he really meant was that Josh needed to score a 12. You know, Josh needed to score 2 points. He needed to score 2 points more than 10 in order for our team to get the win. So at this point, I'm kind of stressing because with this Rogal Dorn commander that I just spent an entire turn shooting at, not dying, I thought I was on track to score an 11. But then it exploded. I was like, okay, cool. Then we play the last turn. I go over to my captain. I'm like, all right, captain, I scored a 13. And he looks at me and goes, awesome. Dude, you need to score a 2. Like, as long as you didn't get completely blown out, we were always going to win. And I was like, oh. I was so stressed for so much during this because I ended up getting a 98 to 79, which is a 13-7. Which is this probably should have been a 14, but Andrew was able to pull a lot of it back in the latter couple of turns. That all the stress that I had initially had ended up just kind of like washing over and being like, oh, I didn't need to do anything this game. Understood. So the fact that I ended up being on Matrix anyway after all of that was, just icing on the cake. Because overall, as you can see, we got a 63. So I guess I need to score a 3 instead of a 4. I think I need to get a 4 in order for us to get a win. But realistically, as long as we got at least a draw in this match, we were going to get first overall. And overall, we ended up being the winning team for this event. It was 4 rounds, 8 teams, but we won all 4 of our rounds with a minimum score of 56. We took down the 2nd place, the 4th place, the 5th place, and the 6th place team. And for personal pride, I was the top scoring player at the entire event. I scored a total of 63 battle points. And the second highest scoring player was also on my team, which was Will Stevens. He scored 54 points overall. So overall, we won the event, and I was top scoring player, which felt really good. One of the big things about this that was a little bit different for me is I'm used to being like a first defender or part of a pair where I'm being used to like attack certain matchups. And this was a very different role for me than I'm used to playing. Because in this one, my job was I was kind of expected to pull in medium wins. I was expected to do well. I was going to be one of the anchors for the team in order to make sure that we could get the points and push us over the edge and take things that were fairly drawish and turn them into wins. Because as you can see, I was asked to score at least 5 more points than anyone else on the team. Normally, from what you can see, I'm normally fairly middle of the pack in terms of what the team is asking for me, right? So the fact that I was expected to be one of our big scorers was a bit of a different role for me. So I was actually very happy that I was able to exceed expectations in every single one of in 3 out of my 4 games and be on Matrix in the last one. Now, someone had asked, I think in the last after action report, how I feel about the list and would I change anything about it. And I think, realistically, I didn't really like this second Scout Sentinel. I don't think it really did a whole lot for the list. I would probably go back and just play the same list that I took to Charity Cup, where this 10-man Cadian shock troops goes back to being a 20-man. You can more reliably use it to walk out onto the board later on in the game instead of if you walk out, you just kind of die with the unit. Whereas the Scout Sentinel, it allows you to score like a little bit better on secondary, but you're already doing pretty good. You have plenty of little idiots running around. You have 2 units of Catachan. You have another Scout Sentinel. You have 2 Tauroxes. You have the Hellhound. You can use the Vanquishers to score if you really need to because like they don't actually do that much damage. So scoring the secondaries is not that big of a deal. I don't know if I would have had a second Luminous Vanquisher with heavy flamers. I think I probably would try and change this out to melta+lascannon. So 1 with flamers and then 2 with melta+lascannon. But otherwise, I mean, I was pretty happy with the list. It did what it needed to. It was on good boards for it. My team set me up for a lot of success, and I feel like I repaid them. So with all that said, thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. I don't have any events immediately on the horizon. I'm going to be making a move here in the next couple of weeks, so I might be a little bit quieter than usual in terms of the content front. But I'll make sure to see you guys all very soon again. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys all next time. Bye-bye.